Larp Chat Live. This is your host, or one of your co-hosts, Jessica. Tara is on here as well. Maury will not be able to join us this week, but we do have two great guests here for our episode on running a Larp convention. So we have Lori and Nat. So Lori, let's start off with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the conventions that you're involved with.
Sure. I've been LARPing since high school, so 20 something years. And I've done before Beacon, I had done a lot of work with fandom conventions. Mostly got pulled into it by a lovely artist friend of mine who asked me to help her run her art show. Um, for a living, I actually do a little bit of event planning as well, as part of my day-to-day job. And then just last year, well, 2 years ago, really, we said to ourselves, Intercon's neat. Wouldn't it be nice to have one of those in the Midwest? And about a year later, there is now one in the Midwest called Beacon. And it's been a good time. And next year will be coming up in 2019.
All right, excellent, great. And then Nat, how about yourself?
Sure. Hi. So my name is Nat Budin. I've been LARPing since freshman year of college. Gee. Anyway, uh, I have been con-chair of Intercon twice. I'm currently the webmaster of Intercon. And I also founded a smaller LARP convention at Brandeis University called Festival of the LARPs.
All right, great, great. Well, both of you have mentioned two different events, BCon and Intercon. Well, for those of us who may not be familiar, what are both of those events?
Nat, you want to go first?
Yeah,
You're
sure.
the
I guess Intercon is an older event.
Yeah, I've heard a
Yeah.
lot about Intercon, but I haven't really, but this is more for those who are listening in going, what is this event?
Yeah. So Intercon, in its current form, is a LARP convention based in the Boston metro area. It's actually closer to Providence, Rhode Island these days, as of a couple of years ago. It runs about somewhere north of 80 or 90 events in the course of a weekend.
Mhm.
Um, most of which are LARPs, but there's also some panel discussions, moderated discussions, presentations, stuff like that. Um, and most of the LARPs are what I would describe as theater style one shots with precast characters. Let's see, what else shall I say about Intercon? It's been going for over 25 years in various forms. Right, the current incarnation of Intercon is based in Boston, but before that, there was a Mid-Atlantic incarnation in the DC metro area, and there have been a couple of other affiliated events. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. All right, that's great. And Nat, Lori, you mentioned Beacon. That's the one that you're starting in the Midwest. Tell us a little bit more about that and how it's similar to Intercon and how it might be different.
A lot of the big LARP events seem to be happening on the coasts. There's a huge contingent of LARPers out here in the Midwest, specifically centered in Chicago. So a group of us basically got together and decided we'd like an event we could drive to instead of fly to. So we put together a convention. It's actually just in the suburbs of Chicago. We capped ourselves at 80 attendees this year, as opposed to 80 events. And we did have 5 times for about 20 games that ran this year overall. So we started very small on purpose, and we're looking forward to growing and making it an annual event now.
All right, good, good. Glad to hear. So with that, what got both of you into going from LARPing to running LARP events?
Peer pressure.
Isn't that always what it is?
Of course.
You're a natural fit for that role, Laurie. Like, I see you organize even in game, in character, and I'm like, that's impressive.
Yeah, I did tend to do that a lot in games. I like going overboard a little bit. I'll organize dinners. I'll organize special events in games. For weekend long events, I'll organize a whole day sometimes. So it really was a natural outgrowth of that, I think, a little bit. Also, in this instance, it really was a case of, if I want this, I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to do it. Actually, the three of us, Quinn, Susan, and I, that got together to run this game. Last year, when we couldn't get to Intercon because of snow, we all got together for dinner, and Susan and I sort of conspired and said, we really want a con out here. Who can we get to help us and keep us on the straight and narrow? And the natural answer was Quinn. So it really was sort of, we did it to ourselves a little bit too.
And for me, my entry into con running was actually software development. I got pulled into helping build the Intercon website while I was in college, when my friend who was running Intercon at the time, Chad Bergeron, asked me to do some features on the con website that they were having trouble getting done. And at that point, that put me into contact with the whole ConCom of it. And, well, here we are years later.
Yeah, be careful if you have a marketable skill. You will get pulled into these con
Yeah.
conventions real quick.
Yeah, especially if it's either event planning or computer programming. Those both seem to be the major ones.
Yeah, a lot of us creatives are not as confident in those areas. And so when we find a buddy who's good at that stuff, we definitely show you the love.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. Well, Lori, you had mentioned that you're as your day job, you're an event planner. So what sort of things
I do some event planning. I'm a project
yeah.
manager,
Okay,
really.
project manager. All right. Well, how has being in that career helped you in running in facilitating Beacon, and what from Beacon have you learned that you can then take back to your day job?
Yeah, I think what has always really been helpful to me is just the ability to structure out a plan. Before I got into project management, actually, I was very much all right, we've got a goal, let's just go for it. Who needs structure? Who needs a plan? Let's just do our best. And the more I get into project management, the deeper I get into it, the more, just being able to sit down and put together a timeline and say, okay, this stuff's got to be done by September. So I got to find someone to do it by August. So, getting those self-imposed deadlines, time slips real fast, real fast. And so if you can put together a plan and, self-discipline your way into getting stuff done, you're still going to do it at the last minute, but at least it's the last minute when you need it, as opposed to the last minute when you needed it a week ago, so that's always been real good. In terms of Beacon, I think one of the big things that I ended up taking from it is, we were very small. We didn't have a lot of money. We weren't going to have a lot of participants, but we made a very big point about, if we couldn't do it well and inclusively, then there wasn't a point in doing it. The company I work for actually makes building fire and safety codes, and actually implemented the Americans with Disabilities Act before it was even law into their safety codes. And it's a big point of pride in our company. And being a project manager in IT over there, we kind of have been hemming and hawing and saying, we'll get those web accessibility things in as soon as it's part of the ADA and we're required to. And building this convention in a sort of accessibility first methodology really let me kind of put my foot down a little bit and get the gumption to put my foot down at work and say, no, this is not what we're supposed to be ahead of this. This is the way you're supposed to do it. Even if we don't have a single person at con who needs this accommodation, it should be there, because we don't know who's going to come. And someone who might have otherwise not come will show up and need this. Yeah, it's been really nice to, you always think, well, that's expensive, or we can't do it, or, why don't we wait until someone needs it? There's no point in waiting. There's no point in waiting. Just get it done the right way. And that's been a really, really great lesson to learn. Yeah.
Good.
And also getting that in on the ground floor when you're in your first year and you have an intentionally small number for scalability must make that a lot more feasible to do. So that's awesome planning.
Yeah, definitely. And Nat, how about you? What sort of things have you carried over from your career to event running, and what sort of things have you have bled over from event running back to your career?
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny question tonight, because I don't know. if everyone's aware, but Intercon second round signups open tonight.
Oh dear.
So we're actually on a brand new web application that I've been working on for the last 5 years, and we rolled it out this year. Last week, when first round signups opened, we had basically a train wreck.
Oh dear.
And so, like, I, as a software developer, I kind of knew this might happen. Well, I guess I should say about how Intercon signups work. It's a self-service system. So if you have a paid-up ticket for the con, when signups open on a particular night at 7 p.m. Eastern, you can go into the website and register yourself for any game you want. As you can imagine, everybody's clicking like mad.
Yep.
And this is not the first time we've had the website meltdown. I remember the first year I tried to sign up for Intercon games. The web server was running on this Dell Dimension mini tower in the kitchen of the webmaster. And apparently it literally... the story I hear is that it literally overheated. So we've learned a lot since then. I feel like working on this thing has taught me a lot about site reliability and operations that I've been able to use in my career. But aside from that, one of the really interesting aspects of it, and Laura, you touched on accessibility, which I respect immensely what Beacon has done on that front. And one of the things that's happened over the years is that the website was originally written with binary gender hard-coded into it. That is, games would have a certain number of male roles, a certain number of female roles, and a certain number of neutral roles. And on your profile, when you created your account on the website, you would have to select your own gender, which the site would assume was the gender of characters you wanted to play. This is baked in pretty much everywhere in the old code base. And one of the primary goals of the rewrite was to stop doing that. And I think the lesson from this is that as web developers, or as people who work with data in general, we want to make data fit into nice little boxes. And we design our forms, we design our software, we design our processes in such a way as to make the data work for us. But when we do that, we're constraining what humans can do with it, and we're constraining what humans can be, or how humans can define themselves to us.
Yeah, that's definitely huge on the IT side on making sure that we're cognizant on a lot of things there as well.
I think that, if I can say, I think that filters right down to the game design too. I think that one of the reasons that, in hindsight, it makes sense that if your games are going to have male female roles, right? It wasn't just about the binary gender of the people; it was about the games and how they were written. There's going to be a really great panel at Intercon this year that I'm looking forward to about writing the ickiness, for lack of a better word, the old way out of old LARPs that are really good, really great games, but they have, stereotypes about Roma people, gender politics that aren't great, racism, this kind of stuff. You can clean up a game, preserve the good parts of it, and get rid of that piece of the past. And I think I didn't see the round one as a train wreck, by the way, Nat. That may be a very inside perspective. It looked pretty good I got my first choice.
Oh, fair enough.
I think the work you guys have done to keep bringing this this hobby into the future and into the present even has been tremendous. I've been watching it very interestedly because I think you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I'm not part of it, but I've been on the coding and development side when it comes to event planning. So I can tell you from the person who's behind the scenes, behind the computer screaming because they think everything's on fire, as long as the people on the front end are like, oh, this looks different and this looks better than what we had before, it's a win. Yeah. So just take that.
Fair enough.
So awesome. So there a term keeps popping up here on this, and that's accessibility. I know that's a major thing that we're starting to see in a lot of conventions out there and a lot of events for LARP. So what are you both doing within your respective events and circles? Make sure that LARP is more accessible to the general public and to different members of society.
Well, I'd say, like I said, we tried to think accessibility first in a lot of ways. The first thing, and accessibility means a lot of things too. I think that that's important to know. Traditionally, that word applies to, making sure that folks with different disabilities and that sort of thing can participate. But I think that that term is really starting to open up and make sure, for instance, not looking at it as a disability, but different genders and different levels of queerness and all that kind of stuff are welcome. People who might be of other marginalized identities are welcome. Like, accessibility has become a really big, broad subject. But starting at the root of it, venue is a big one, and most venues have to be ADA compliant, but there's a lot of corners cut and there's a lot of good enoughs cut. And you've got the added problem with most cons building on top of that of the temporary structures that have to be put together to make this all work, right? So you put together a little platform so that people who are speaking can get up there, and even a 3-inch step becomes an issue, right? If you've got someone speaking who's in a wheelchair, it's real easy to sort of forget that. So we just basically went down, you can't list everything, but we tried to, as generally as possible, make a list of things we always want to look out for. And we just kept going back to it, right? So make sure that everybody can get in the room, make sure that everybody can participate, make sure that, people with cognitive issues, reading or hearing have or visual or auditory issues can manage to continue. Like we said, make sure that everything is as, gender friendly, queer friendly as we can make it. Make sure that everybody feels comfortable playing under their own names in their own skin, that kind of thing. We just had to keep going back to it. And I think we were trying to be a little bit thoughtful too about the fact that if you're in a position where you can help run a LARP convention, you're in a reasonably privileged position in a lot of ways. You're probably reasonably, at least comfortable financially. You're probably in a place where your job is not, a constant struggle, and you have a reliable schedule. You probably have some support at home or in your, friend life. And so we tried to all make sure to examine that too. We all felt like, oh, hey, affording this isn't a big deal. We're doing a pretty cheap con. Well, pretty cheap con can be kind of, oxymoron sometimes, no matter how cheaply you run. So, we want to try and make sure that we've got all those corners. You can't hit every corner, but if you sort of make a list and conscientiously, once a meeting even, just kind of go, have we hit on anything tonight that might be a problem for any of these identities, for any of these issues? You just have to keep going through the checklist and never stop paying attention. That's the thing too. Don't get complacent.
Got it. And Nat, how about you?
So I think Lori hit on a lot of the big points. I'm struggling to think. Lori obviously thinks about this a lot. And okay, so one thing I do want to actually mention from the last time I was con-chair of Intercon was putting a better safety procedure in place. Before there had been a policy, but it was a little bit hard to actually find the people that you needed to make a report on anything. It was a little bit loosey-goosey, frankly. And so I had started going to professional conferences at that point, and one of the things I saw is that they had a hotline that you could call 24/7 and get somebody from the staff. And so it was pretty important to me to put that in place, and also open up recruiting for people to help run not just that team, but the rest of the con much more broadly to the community. I think it's, Lori, as you said, running a con in the first place puts you in a little bit of a privileged position, but I also think it's important that cons make it accessible to join the group of people who can run cons. That's how I got into it, and it's how a lot of people I know got into it. They didn't start a con; they were brought into running a con. I think, is there anything else about? Oh yeah. So I think there are some special accessibility concerns where LARP is concerned. Um, in particular, um, so okay, let's say you're running a game where the character sheets are sent out ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that is that's actually great for accessibility in general. People can use a screen reader to read them if they want to, or a
Mm-hmm.
braille reader. Not all formats are equally accessible, but also a lot of games will hand out additional information on slips of paper mid-game. And as a
Mm.
GM, I think it's important to be thinking about that. Uh, and if you have a player with visual impairment, how are you going to help them play that game? One thing I've seen done is to actually have a GM take the player aside and read them the material, but it's even better if you have some way to set up so you can email it to their phone
Mm-hmm.
or something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of what you've been focusing on is more the technology side of first making it so that volunteering itself is accessible, which for those of us who are con runners, yay, because it means that we don't burn ourselves out. And also, again, helps people from the general public get more involved. But it sounds like the other thing that you're looking at as something that game runners should consider is potentially leveraging technology to make even at game information more accessible. Is that correct?
Right, and
Yeah.
also, that's it's the example that comes to mind for me. But there's a lot of other ways to do it other than leveraging technology
Mm-hmm.
um, to to make games more
Mm-hmm.
accessible to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another one that comes to mind for me is Boffer Combat,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
which I'm not as experienced with Boffer Combat as with theater style LARP. So maybe somebody else who has more experience of it could talk about it. But I'd be curious to know how you deal with that from an accessibility point of view.
Okay.
Yeah, I've actually seen them at conventions. The double exposure events, particularly Dreamation, has had some buffer combat tournaments and also different mods or modules where participants can go in and experience buffer combat, among other things, in LARPs. And usually there's more of an emphasis on accessibility at those conventions than there is just walking into a LARP. And I think with bot for combat, the big thing is setting those expectations so people actually know whether or not they can do it, and also enforcing those expectations. So a lot of games will have different bands that you wear to indicate how heavy you can be hit. People like me with invisible illnesses might look okay, but we can't go full force in combat. So stuff like that's really important, and really just setting those expectations, because not every LARP event, even at a convention, is necessarily for every player. So as much as I love backward combat, I don't do it as much anymore because of my physical limitations. So I gravitate more towards. I'm actually kind of like a latecomer to theatrical LARP, and have been enjoying it a lot more, and find that it's more suited to what I can do. So as far as what happens at conventions, that's pretty much the advice. Set those expectations, and then kind of just check in with people and make sure those expectations are enforced.
Definitely, definitely. And that is an important thing there. And you also touched upon it is I try to make things as accessible as possible, but when it comes down to it, what we can do is offer full disclosure on what's available, and then people can make educated choices on whether or not they participate. Nat brought up something, and I'm curious on what both of your thoughts are, both Lori and Nat. What protocols for safety at conventions? Because that's actually something that we're starting to see a lot more of, especially in both fan conventions and LARP conventions. Ways to make it safer for the community at large. And I'm curious as to what both Intercon and BCon have in place with regards to that.
Well, first, I want to say I really appreciate that the community is starting to call it safety instead of security. I think for a long time, the idea of safety at cons was
Mhm.
basically sort of deputized pseudo cops who could throw at anyone who did damage to the venue, and that was about it, right? And these days, people are thinking about it a lot more completely. At Beacon, we had a safety team. We had someone always there, available both in our ops room, and we had a telephone number. We got a Google Voice number that could be switched between the various safety teams' personal phones. So when they were on call, that number would go directly to the appropriate person. We made sure to advertise that. In fact, we printed it on the badges, just to make sure that anyone who needed that help actually had that, in their hand whenever they were on con grounds. And we also put together, the way we had the rooms at this convention, both as a way to save a little money and to be a very small convention, is we went to a extended stay hotel that had the multi-room suites that you can rent. And so ops for us was a 2-bedroom suite. The main space was ops, and then 1 bedroom on each side, one just for the safety team if they needed it, and one for anyone who wanted to walk in. Those were quiet rooms. And they were literally just spaces where you could go, you could sit down, you could lay down, you could get away from the hubbub and the bustle and potentially the bleed of a game, and things like that, and just take a moment for yourself, and just giving people that space. Right? If I, get really upset at a convention and I'm sharing a room with 4 people and they're getting, they're getting ready for their next game, I don't have anywhere to go, and that really exacerbates the problem. Giving people space to detune from that stress, I think, is really something that's happening a lot more lately. I think most cons these days have got some kind of quiet room available to folks. For the other thing that we didn't get a chance to do at Beacon, I would like for us to do as we get larger, is I think that mental health safety in general is something that the LARP community is getting a lot smarter about. When I talk about bleed from games, it's more the very immersive, longer games that can really get some people in a headspace that's not healthy or safe. But even these one shots, even a 4-hour game, can really push it through the ringer. Sometimes that's the best day you've had in a long time, even though your character had the worst day they'd had in a long time. Sometimes, though, it makes it so it's the worst day you've had. And I'd really like to see us and more conventions in general bring on a mental health professional who can be available, even if just by text or by digital, just because of limited resources and that sort of thing. But preferably in certain hours, to almost have office hours where someone can go and say, no, look, I am really having a hard time. This is about to ruin my weekend. Can we talk? Right? I wouldn't ever want to deputize a volunteer or anything like that. I think this is something, much like lawyers and insurance companies, I think this is not something we can farm out. We're going to have to hire people to do that and pay them their going rate, which means only cons of a certain size will be able to afford it. But I think it's something that like I said, a lot of the longer games are doing that. Some of them are even starting to embed counselor characters who are played by trained counselors in the game. So both in and out of character, you can get that help. And I'm really glad to see that. I'm really hoping we can start doing that at Beacon in the future as we grow and have the money to do that.
So. Oh man, that's awesome. I love that idea. So the one other thing I wanted to touch on is content disclosure of games. So at Intercon, we've been requiring for a number of years that GMs put content disclosures on the descriptions of their games on the website, so that people can frankly know what they're getting themselves into. Because not every topic is safe for every person, and not every topic is safe when handled in certain ways. So that's something that I think has been really useful for the community, and also it's useful just for people to start being frankly forced to think about what the content they should be disclosing in the game they've written is. The other so sorry, Lori, I am going to go to the security side of safety for a second. So the other part that I think we should touch on is the procedure for incident reporting and the follow-up to that. Right. There's a controversy going on about Arisha right now that you may have heard about.
vaguely. If it was months ago, I probably already forgot.
Now, this has pretty much been going on over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Ouija is an enormous sci-fi convention. I say enormous, it's not enormous like PAX, but it's in the thousands of attendees.
I think they hit 10,000 last year. Like, I think
Oh,
they're
wow.
really pushing it. Yeah.
Okay. And apparently, basically a couple of weeks ago, a former con chair of Ouija wrote a long post about how Ouija had handled an incident in which they had been involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of broke a dam.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that Ouija has not systemically been wonderful at following the procedure that they stated they were going to follow.
Mm.
And I think that's a big part of what's important about this. If you set an expectation to attendees, it's really important in the context of safety to actually follow through on it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think one of the issues with Ouija too is this sort of inverted responsibility thing that happens, I think, a lot. And this is what gets big groups into trouble. The higher you are in the structure, the more work you do, the less accountable you become.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if you are accountable, the more people are willing to excuse because you work so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is sort of like, you have to be beyond reproach kind of thing when you get higher. I think as con runners in general, we need to flip that around, right? If I'm, I'll be, perfectly honest. In my wilder days, I certainly did, cheese off a lot of people, and I was not entirely a nice person in college.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure. I was 19 years old and depressed. If in that era I had been working for a convention, I should not have been working for a convention, right? I'll be the first person to say, having reflected on my behavior in the past and stuff. Because even today I consider most of the incidents minor, right? They're screaming matches between friends kind of thing, but that still is something that makes other people uncomfortable. It made those friends uncomfortable at the time. And you can't say, oh well, they're volatile but they work so hard, we'll just keep them out of public view, right? Like, you can't, even if you really 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 need them. It's almost the same principles with accessibility. If you can't do it right, then you can't do it, full stop. And if you can't run a convention without X person who has a history with the convention and knows all this stuff, then you can't run the convention. If they are a person who is making people feel unsafe, has a history of being reported on, that kind of stuff, you have to stop. You have to stop and make those people more responsible, not less. More accountable, not less.
Yeah, I have a question in terms, kind of related, but in terms of problematic behavior in the past. If I'm having a private conversation with everybody here, obviously we're live and streaming. And
hi, everyone.
And I say, hey, I trust all of you, as friends and colleagues, and I know this person who did something really problematic, and maybe they even did it to me, and I give you a name, and kind of whisper networky. It's not really verifiable. There's definitely not been any legal action going on, but there's certainly someone I'm saying is I think a safety and security risk. What do you do with that information as an event organizer?
The first thing I'd say is, do you want to make this an official report?
Yep.
Because the conversation we have after that is going to be very different depending on the answer.
Yep.
Okay, so let's say I say, yeah, I want to make that an official report, and I still want to come to your convention, but I want the report to be anonymous.
The short answer for us, as people not on the safety team, is let me hand you off to the safety team. And they have their own processes and procedures. I don't want to speak to them because the folks who ran our safety team, Eli, Eve, and Kelsey, hi guys, if you're out there, you were amazing. They have run safety for a lot of much larger conventions. They've run things for BronyCons and stuff like that do have thousands and thousands of people. They know what works, and they do it in a very victim-centered, thoughtful, honest place. So we did have some of that actually come into BCon. We said there are people who came in who said either there are problematic people in the community, here's an anonymous report, or X person actually did X to me, here's a full report, right? And every time, do you want to make this official report? Yes, okay, here's our head of safety, and whatever the head of safety says goes. I think that's a great way actually to keep your CONCOM accountable. If you trust your safety team, give them autonomy. Mm-hmm. Make it clear that no member of the convention team can override safety.
Yep. And what that implies, of course, is that the rest of the CONCOM can't be on the safety team.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's some pretty heavy stuff to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we got that taken care of. So basically what it comes down to is make sure you have a really good safety and security team, and they should not be part of leadership, because otherwise that could lead to a whole bunch of problems. So with the time we have left, I do want to talk on scheduling on a couple of different ways. One is scheduling like the actual stuff in the convention, and second, scheduling on the planning side. So for someone who wants to run a convention, how much lead time should you give yourself? It should be like 6 months, a year, 2 years. Think it over.
We gave ourselves about 14 months.
Okay.
And it was honestly, we did it. We're happy we did it. It was great. We were all very keen to do it, so we all wanted to get it done within a year. That's about, I suspect it's about the attention span of most people. If you tell someone you're planning an event 2 to 5 years in the future, they're going to go, oh, talk to me next year, right? It may not be enough time, especially if you're doing it from scratch. Mm-hmm. If you've got a consistent year-over-year plan, then I'm going to say you probably need about 10 months, right? Because you have it in month A, you rest in month B, you start the next year in month C, right? And that's about how it runs. But for something brand new, I mean, a year minimum, and longer is better if you've got the attention span, for sure.
Yeah. Got it. You can maybe get away with less than a year if you're not going to be using a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you have space squared away at a university or something like that, maybe you can do this in less time.
Sure.
But also it's important to give your attendees enough lead time and your game runners enough lead time to actually put things together.
Yeah. Never underestimate how much time your game runners are going to need.
Yeah.
I was surprised every time Susan was the one who handled our GMs. Every time she said she wanted X amount of time, I was like, really? We want that much time? Every time we really needed more time. Absolutely. Never underestimate, how much work these people are putting in to bring something great to your con, and give them all the lead time you can and all the support you can. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's things about this that just take more time than you would think they would. Dealing with hotel contracts is a big one.
Yeah. And lawyers and insurance as a result too. Yeah. You basically got. Yep.
Yep, I'm familiar with that on my end too, with some of the local conventions here. So we got that. So on the other side of it, scheduling, the actual scheduling within the event, how do you pick which games go where? Because sometimes people end up wishing that they were like multiple versions of themselves to be able to go around and do everything.
For such a small con, for us, it was space. It was entirely space driven every time. We had 2 big rooms where we could run games that had more than 12 people in them. And then we had 3 smaller rooms, sort of each one slightly smaller than the next. So we put the big games in the big rooms. We put the larger games later in the day. Well, we didn't do anything really late night. Nothing ran past midnight. So it was really evening, then afternoon, then morning. We kind of found that was the order in which people thought about games. Everybody wants to play an evening game. If you're a gamer, your post-dinner game has been your bread and butter since whatever. Some people like to socialize during the day, so you get slightly fewer in the afternoon sometimes. And then many people don't like to get up, so your morning games are going to be small. That's just the way it is. They want to have a leisurely breakfast, especially as we're now an aging community. I think we've got a lot of people bringing their kids and, visiting relatives while they're in town and all that kind of stuff. And that sort of stuff tends to happen in the mornings. So yeah, we ended up discovering we didn't have a lot of options. Here's the big games. Oh, they fit in here. Let's switch these two. Here's the medium games. That's it. All right, everything else goes in the morning. Good luck, guys. and we tucked them where they had to be. We did let GMs express a preference. If we had someone who said, I absolutely can't run a morning game because I'm not conscious before 10, fair enough, we won't schedule you there. But by and large, it was big stuff in the big rooms, popular stuff at night, and work from there. We only had 20 slots to fill, so yeah.
Right, and at the other end of things, with Intercon, we kind of can't. It's at the scale where we can't do put all the cards on a grid and try and make sure everybody is the least unhappy. Kind of. We used to do that. I've been in meetings like that. They were terrible, by the way.
Yep.
And when you're past 80 games, it becomes impossible. So at this point, the way we do it is that the order you propose your game is the order that we schedule your game. If you propose your game early in the year, we will put your game on the scheduling grid first during that meeting, and then someone else can't have the space you got. So that kind of also incentivizes people to bid early.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, plan ahead.
Definitely.
Good. So since both of you have experience in running events, what advice do you have for people who are thinking about it, both in what's to do and what not to do?
Run away.
I wish someone gave me that advice.
Just be prepared for more work than you expect. That's the long and the short of it. I'm going to go and even with these big conventions, when you've just got very specific slots, right? I'm going to be second in the art show. And I'm going to go to one meeting a month, and then I'm going to work, the 4 days of the convention, and maybe I'll do a few emails, right? Oh, no. People expect it to run like a business, which means you're going to be responding to GMs and players and everyone else for, regularly, possibly even daily, pretty much from the day you start accepting game submissions until the day after the convention. Especially in this very digital, very 24/7 world, someone's got to run the social media. Someone's got to prepare the emails that have to go out. Someone's got to, right? And all of that happens on this very constant, there's no stopping the clock. So the smartest thing you can do is to plan for more work, but give yourself that a hard limit, right? At a certain point, you've got to say, it'd be neat if that happened for the con. There's always another cool thing you can do. And it's really easy to get really enthusiastic about it. Oh, I can do that real quick for you. And suddenly you've spent more time working for the convention than you did your grown-up job that week. And you're exhausted. And I had to bow out of one game at BCon this year because I had just put myself in a position where I had worked so much. I was like, I can't stay up that late tonight. I need to go to bed. Sorry, guys. And it was fine and everything was great. But I now know that limit. And next year I'm going to give myself more empty spots in the convention that I'm running and not try to game, semi nonstop during that kind of thing. So, know it's going to be more work than you expect, but don't hesitate to set your limits, because that's going to be, it's better for you. It's better for the con. It's better for your friends and family. It's better for your co-runners. We all get along really well, but when we got tired, we all got tired and hungry. We actually have had a couple arguments where it's like, we're going to go get soup and then we'll be less mad now. Because we just overtaxed ourselves. So definitely be very wary of that. Yeah.
So I was thinking about what didn't I know going into running a convention. I think there's this kind of terror to it. The first time you sit down to write an email to the whole convention and realize, oh my God, I'm speaking to the entire convention here. People are going to be interpreting what I say in their own ways. People are not going to like everything I have to say. Or the first time someone didn't like something I had said to them in a private email and posted it on Facebook and said, "This is what the convention said to me."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of people have the impulse to get very corporate and very impersonal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and personally, what I found works for me, and I'm not necessarily saying this works for everybody, is to go the opposite way and be as human and as vulnerable as possible when speaking for the convention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because you can. It's fine to be clear about it when you're saying, this is what we've decided as a convention, this is our policy now. 90% of the time, that's not what you're saying. You're saying, this is what I think. And
Mhm.
I think that distinction is an important one to be able to make in tone.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. And people definitely will take things a lot differently. If we say from the Concom or we say from Quinn, Susan, and Lori, those are two very different sign-offs.
Yep.
And the entire tone of your communication changes. And the entire tone of the response changes too. I agree it's a really good idea to keep the Concom very human. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely important there. Well, we're coming up closer to the top of the hour. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners? Either any tidbits of wisdom, jokes, what have you, anything that you're working on that you want to promote?
Uh, um, well, go to beconlarp.com. We don't have next year's dates up yet, but we're getting close to our first meeting for 2019, so we'll be updating the site pretty soon. We had a great time. We'll expand a little bit, not a lot, but if you're in the Chicago area, please do join us. Um, and hopefully I'll see you guys at Intercon, but I'll let Nat promo that.
Yeah, so Intercon S is coming up in February. It's going to be in Warwick, Rhode Island, just outside TF Green Airport. It's very easy to get to from the airport. There's a shuttle bus. It's free. And there's still a lot of space and a lot of games. Now is a great time to sign up.
Mm-hmm.
s.interconlarp.org is the website, because this is Intercon S.
Mm-hmm.
Because we letter our cons, and we're going to have a problem in a few years, by the way.
Oh dear.
But we're not going to do Intercon Aardvark in whatever year that is for AA.
I don't even know. I'm sure
Wow.
somebody has a plan, but it's not me. On a personal level, the other thing I want to kind of get people thinking about is that, like I said before, I just finished making this web app for Intercon,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't make it just for Intercon. I would like you, Lori, or maybe not Lori, but whoever wants to use Intercode to run their convention website.
We are already planning to ask you for it. That's one of our agenda items. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
So people should definitely feel free to talk to me about it. It's an open source project on GitHub. I'm going to say a URL. It's going to be impossible to understand what I'm saying. So maybe if there's some place I could just paste it up instead. But
Email it to us and we will include it in the show notes on YouTube.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, I would love for people to use this thing. I would love for people to contribute to this thing. I want this to be the best way to run a convention website.
Mm-hmm.
From a user perspective, I have to say it is head and shoulders above anything anybody else has got. It's been very smooth sailing. It's very intuitive. It's very open and transparent with what data you guys have. It's a real work of art.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it. Thank you to both of you, to Lori and Nat, for being here today, and thank you, Tara, for making it too. So we're going to be back in 2 weeks, so keep an eye on our Facebook page. We'll have announcements when it comes to what our next topics are going to be about. And with that, we're going to be signing off. And again, you can find us on Facebook, Twitch TV, and on YouTube at LARP Chat Live. I think Twitter as well. And then if our website is larpchat.live, and there you can reach us and find out a little bit more about what we do and what our focus is on going forward. So with that, everyone, have a great night.